Rachel, and we're twins. We're also the fifth generation.
Still can't hear.
I think it's the microphone position.
Where is it?
How's that?
That's better.
Okay. All right. I'll start again.
Yes.
My name's Jan West, and this is my brother Peter, and we are fifth generation of the descendants from the first fleet, the Prince George, that came out from Prussia in 1838 and was classified as the first of 4 ships that brought 500 souls from persecution in Prussia to Australia, Adelaide, a new life.
Now I can sit down.
Yes. Okay, right. Now this is the contents of what I'm going to talk about today, the reasons why they were escaping, the ship and the conditions on board, tragic arrival at Adelaide, and what happened when they got settled in the Barossa Valley. And also discuss the connections between the people on the ship in 1838 and myself in my family tree. King Frederick III came to the throne in Prussia, which was the largest state of the German Empire, in 1835, and decided to make some changes to the religion of the times. There was 2 religions. There was Roman Catholics and there was Lutherans, which was the Protestants. 90% of the Lutheran population were happy to comply, 10% weren't, and they continued to meet in secret in the forests late at night with their pastors to carry out their religious practices and hymn singing. As a result of their activities, many of them were persecuted, they were stripped of their lands, they were thrown into prison, and many were destitute. So, the pastor in charge of 3 states was Posen, Brandenburg and Silesia, was Pastor August Cabell, who was a young 30-year-old, energetic, passionate pastor of the time, and he wanted to protect his congregation. So he collaborated with a Christian Presbyterian philanthropist called George Angus, who lived in London. They originally tried to escape to America, but those plans fell through. Whereas George Fife Angus was a member of the South Australian Colony Board, who were looking for suitable immigrants to come and join their colony in Adelaide. So as a result of the 2 working out a plan, they ended up getting 4 ships together and organising a voyage from Prussia, from here, all the way down through the Cape of Good Hope to Adelaide. Now, getting to the port of Hamburg, which was the only port in Prussia at that time, was hard work. There was only 2 methods of transportation. One was by horse and the other one was by river barge. They had to take all their dried food that they could, only clothes. They couldn't take much furniture, all their clothing and tools of trade like spades and hoes and whatnot, and most of them had organised to bring their wooden houses, which were prefabbed. In those days, I didn't know they had prefabbed houses in that time, but they did. And they were used at the bottom of the ship. There was also something else they took in the ships. Peter, can you enlighten?
Oh, mainly bricks
Yes.
as ballast.
Yes, bricks were carried in the bottom of the boats to make sure that the boats stayed stable. This is just a picture of the confusion of immigration waiting to get on board their ship, and they finally get on board. Crowded conditions were pretty terrible at that time due to cramped conditions, narrow bunks, wooden bunks that extended from the edges and the middle of the only living area. Mattresses were usually straw, harbouring lice from previous occupants. It was dark, damp, and often foul-smelling due to lack of inadequate sanitation. No toilets existed on this ship. Each family had a bucket. Overwhelmingly, people were seasick, and the smell of vomit was so disgusting that the crew wouldn't go down there. So it was tough. This is an eating area. There's no photographs. These are all drawings and impressions. And I think that's on deck. Anyway, this three-masted bark, which was a small ship and fairly old, had to get around the Cape of Good Hope. So this is a quick video. David told me it would work. I'm sorry. It's a video of the waves they experienced in this tiny little vessel, and what happened when they went round the Cape of Good Hope. And a lot of them died of seasickness and dysentery, and it was really quite a shocking journey. But I'm afraid the video doesn't show the waves that I wanted to show you. Anyway, burials at sea were very common. Just get the right page. The death toll was high. 2 passengers died before the journey began, and 2 more died before they even reached the open sea. 12 died during the voyage, which works out approximately 10%. But most ships were 20%. And the reason why they died was, firstly, tuberculosis was rife at that time in every European city. Typhus, which is carried by rats, childbirth, and infectious diseases like influenza and meningitis, diphtheria. But the most common cause of death was a simple dysentery. No treatment was worked out, and people became dehydrated and died. The most common age group that died was children, from the age of about 12 downwards. Out of 199 passengers on this particular ship, only 188 arrived. This is a photo of a sea burial, which were usually carried out at dawn when nobody was around. Bodies were wrapped in hessian, hands and feet tied, carried by the sailors to the deck. A short eulogy, a blessing, was read, and they were thrown overboard to the hungry sea. I forgot to mention there was no doctors on any of these ships. After 3 months' voyage, there was a lot of relief and excitement, anticipating land had been sighted. They were directed through St. Vincent Gulf, and eventually the pilot headmaster directed them through a small creek entrance to shallow water. This was called Holdfast Bay, but later in history it's called Point Misery. What they encountered was nothing like they expected. George Angus had contracted somebody to build a jetty and some shelter while they established their village. None of that happened. The man that received the money disappeared off the face of the earth.
Oh dear.
Somebody suggested that he went to the Californian goldfields.
Having already made his fortune.
As they threw out an anchor in the middle of the shallow water, got out into small boats, but they were overwhelmed with the smelly mud flats, swampy mangroves, and no pathway, no actual roadway to direct them where to go. There was even no staging area for all the things that they were carrying off the ship. I'll just describe what the crew thought about this. Of 16 sailors on this ship, they were so fed up with this wowser, hymn-singing Christian mob that they all refused to assist unloading cargo and passengers. So all the Lutheran men had to gather and carry their women and children to the muddy shore and then turn around and bring all their possessions. Then the party, despite all this, washed the mud off their legs, put on their shoes and stockings, and all walked up the side of this muddy creek to find one or two grog shops, a few stark naked natives, and a large iron store. Goods and merchandise lay all about them in every direction. That'd be enough to put you off. As there was no temporary accommodation as planned, they all carried out, all sheltered under trees. It was November, thank goodness, and spread tarpaulins out until a settlement could be reached. Angus had purchased some land 10 miles east, and within 6 weeks there was 19 homes built. Sounds marvellous. And they called this little tiny village Klemzig. Mudflats and Klemzig. This was called after Pastor Cabell's hometown in Prussia, Brandenburg. They stayed here for 12 months and planted all their seeds, got their chooks laying eggs, and lived quite a good life, except that the crops continued to fail. The reason was they were 10 miles inland. So Angus agreed to move further inland, and at the time there was a government commission to open up further land. And they found the land of the Seven Seals, which is 7 valleys in the Barossa Valley. So people were given the opportunity to move, which my family did. And the families that are connected to me are 4. They're Patras, Kiesewetter, Linda, and the John family, who later intermarried. And they all moved into, those 4 families moved into Tanunda, which is well known in the Barossa for its wine. After several years, they became quite prosperous, and they began to win prizes with their wine, etc. The one person that was stood out in the journey that I remember reading about was a man called Gottlieb Julius, who was a bad-tempered butcher, a card sharp, a gambler, a wife-beater. And after about 5 or 10 years in in the Barossa Valley, he died. And as a result, his nephew came out to take over the property and keep it running. And this is his nephew, Frederick Wilhelm and Maria Sophia. They got married in 1969. And as a result, they prospered. This is Tanunda, where they settled. And this is the house, the Georgian house that was built for his 10 children. And that is the house that I took in 2003 when I was in the Barossa, and that's his grandson, Keith. Now, out of all of these children, 2 of them died, which was about average, out of 10. And this one is the first one. She's gone. This lady is called Augustus Louise Pauline Patras. And that's my grandmother when she was 18. And this is her marrying her sweetheart. Lovely love story. This man who was droving, and he came down near the property of her father's and needed to water his cattle. And she met him, and they fell madly in love, spent 3 months together. And he took his cattle back to down to the Adelaide markets, and on the way back, he had lots of money, and he proposed and married her. And they had 5 years in the Barossa before they disappeared to West Australia. What happened at the end of the 19th century that the whole world knew about, and thousands of people came to West Australia? Somebody tell me?
Gold.
Gold rush, yes. After several years at the Barossa, they realised there wasn't enough land for their children and all the other children that were part of this family. So they decided to seek their fortune at the gold rush, and they went to the gold rush. Unfortunately, after 3 years and 3 dead children, they decided to settle in Perth. This is taken when they were well established in Perth with their 7 of their 9 children. 2 of them died, and this is my grandmother. And my grandfather, his name was Heinrich or Henry. They were a very happy family, quite cultured. At night time, he used to play the violin and read poetry to the children. That was unusual. Now, going back, this little child here is my mother. She was the last born of the 9 children, and this is her when she fell in love with her partner, George Illich, who is my father. This is her as an older woman, a grandmother. She was a very talented, artistic, spiritual, gentle woman, proud to be her daughter. And this is the 2 of us. So this is the last slide. So I'm showing you the connections from the bad-tempered butcher to this family. And I didn't show you families of my grandchildren, but this is as the line goes down in history. Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to say one more thing. As a result of the help from Woodvale Library group, which meets every Tuesday, I've been able to finish a history that I have been trying to write for 30 years. But life gets in the way. And I just want to say thank you to this group for giving me the opportunity to finish my book and to finish the story going back 7 generations.
Jan.
Oh.
Thank you.